Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got another amazing soul coming to us from the US. We have Ryan Crinkle on board today. Ryan is a Colorado native that had a life-changing experience which would alter his perception of the universe. At the formative age of 14, he and a friend saw a UFO descend from the sky and swoop low over their car in a dazzling Technicolor display that burnt itself into his memory forever. Both boys were very excited and overwhelmed, while the friend's mother, who was driving the car, was apparently shut off by the craft as she refused to respond or look up during the incident and now doesn't remember it at all. The boys tried to tell school friends that they had seen something like a flying car and were mercilessly mocked. As a result, Ryan blocked this memory out for many years. It was only decades later that he encountered an orange orb above the Mojave Desert that the memory came flooding back. Reading more about the phenomenon, Ryan eventually learned that these experiences tend to run along family lines. So he began asking and realized that UFO phenomenon is something his family had been suffering silently since the 1930s. Although they had never all talked about it, each member of his family had some kind of strange encounter, often with multiple witnesses. These kinds of questions have led Ryan to explore human consciousness, the natural world, and space in his quest for the bigger answers. Ryan has no book to sell or lectures to offer, but is just a fairly normal family man who likes stargazing and retro video games. So, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
So, I believe you wanted to start off the interview by getting into your orange orb experience, I believe.
Yeah, so this one happened about 3 years ago, and the reason I want to start here instead of at the beginning is because, as you were saying, I realized I'd sort of blocked things out. Even at the time of the Orange Orb encounter, I didn't tell my wife or any of my friends for months afterwards. It went out of my mind. So it was only once I saw the David Grush hearing on television that's like, whoa, I did see something weird a few months ago, and all these things started coming back. It was almost like it triggered it to come back to the surface. So the Orange Orb. I live up in a mountain town above the Mojave called Tehachapi in California. And going down this steep mountain, there's a place out there called Murray Farm, which is a fruit stand out, in the Central Valley of California. And I'm going down the mountain and I see this stationary, completely, just totally still orange ball up in the sky. It's after dark, so you can see it really clearly. It wasn't so bright that it was dazzling. It had sort of a muted color to it, almost like burning embers. Um, I'm sure you've heard lots of people describe orange orbs, and there's sort of burnt orange red color that's a light glow. And it stayed up there, and I'm watching it, rubbing my eyes, like, this isn't right. What is this? And, you know, I, I've lit Chinese lanterns before, and I know what those look like, and it wasn't that. It couldn't have been a drone or an airplane. My thought was maybe an airplane coming towards me, seeing the headlight. Um, but here's the deal. Um, it didn't turn left, it didn't turn right. It disappeared, just straight up out of the sky. From my perspective, I'm driving and it dips behind the mountain top because I'm driving by. So from my perspective, it's blocked for a second. A second later, when I get to the other side, it's totally gone. You can't see anything flying away. I pulled over, to ostensibly where it was floating above and looked around at. I called the fruit stand to see, hey, were you guys running a, drone up there trying to take footage for a commercial or something? And no, nothing like that. And I showed up late to hang out with my buddy in Bakersfield, and really without a good explanation, didn't think about it for months. And Um, yeah, as soon as I saw Grush testifying, I remembered it. I went and asked my wife, "Hey, did I tell you about the orange orb I saw in the sky?" She's like, "No, what are you talking about?" And that actually even opened up the conversation for us. Like she'd always known I had sort of a tangential interest in listening to like Coast to Coast AM and stuff like that. And, always tuned in for the UFO episodes, but we never really talked about why. I think we'd always just sort of assumed it was mental bubble gum, just something for fun, until you see one. So,
Did you figure out how big the orb was?
so as you know, like looking at things in the sky, it's inherently challenging to judge distance and size, especially if it's something you've never seen before. Um, but if I were to hazard a guess, I'd say it was probably around 6 feet across, maybe 300, 500 feet up.
Okay. Because the first two craft that I called in were orange red, or what I call orange lollipop-ish. And they were about, well, both craft were about like 10 feet wide. So yeah, perhaps a scout ship. Yeah, but
hmm
it definitely sounds like yours, really. Um, so was that like the main trigger that brought everything back?
Yeah. So after that, it kind of hits me, like a ton of lead. I'm uh, sitting there and I realized, oh man, this is not the first time I've seen something. Um, and, as you were saying in the introduction, the big one uh, came in my mind. And um, for me, um, that was extremely life-changing. Me and my buddy Jacob, we were in a bowling league in probably about 2004. So back in the aughts, I'm like 14 years old, um, and we're getting out of bowling league. We're middle school age, so neither of us can drive. Obviously, we're both completely sober because we're children and good boys. And we get into the back of his mom's '93 Mercury Sable, and we're driving out to his family farm. So grew up in Greeley, Colorado, which is a little nothing small town. It's grown a lot since then. And then he lived in Kersey, so an even smaller satellite cow town near the cow town I lived in. Um, and so we're just out in the middle of nowhere. It's all corn back then. Um, so we're driving through the cornfields, and I'm sitting there sort of daydreaming, looking out the window, and I think to myself, wouldn't it be weird if I saw a UFO right now? And I know that's a bizarre thought to have, because it certainly wasn't on my mind at the time. But um, when I look up and I see something black up in the sky, and it's kind of realize it's more like a metallic buff tint, almost like I don't know, brushed dark stainless steel or something. And this flat rectangular craft comes down from the sky, and me and my friend Jacob, I grab him like, "Hey, look at this!" And we're freaking out. Hey, it's a UFO! It's a UFO! What is that? And we're trying to get his mom to pay attention. We're like, "Hey, look up! There's literally a UFO above our car. Look at this! What's going on?" And she's locked in. She's at her steering wheel, will not look to us, will not acknowledge us, would not talk about it later when we asked about it. Just totally silent treatment. Now that could have been a self-defense mechanism. Um, but the other weird element of this for me, and I'm sure you've had it with other, experiencers, is that our emotions went out of control at that point. I get hit with the feeling immediately, I'm not supposed to be seeing this. I'm going to get in trouble. I can't see this. I'm not supposed to be looking at this. Externally, we're both giggling. we're in like a haze of goofy delirium that comes over us. We're just laughing uncontrollably. I think maybe at the absurdity of the situation, but in retrospect, it seemed like an inappropriate emotional reaction. And it makes me wonder if we were being acted upon by an outside source that's making us not scream and freak out, but laugh and giggle like this is a playful, fun experience. And so the craft descends down, and it's maybe 50 to 100 feet above us. So I'm talking, you would that would be classified. Hynek would have classified that as a close encounter of the first kind. So a craft sighting within 100 feet. Um, and I would say, were we adults at the time and knew what the heck MUFON was or anything about UFOs, that it would have been a experience similar to like any of the ones you hear about because it was that up close and personal. We had a really good chance to look at the thing. Wasn't a twinkling light up in the sky, in our face, but the craft goes directly over our car, kind of that smooth strafing, no sound whatsoever. It's got like sort of a fuchsia haze or a plasma coming off the bottom and the back of it. Now, I don't know if that was some sort of propulsion or a artifact of whatever it's doing to go up there messing with our eyes looking at it, but it looked like it had a blue or sorry, a fuchsia pink haze coming off of it on the back and on the bottom. And as it passes over us, bunch of flashing lights and it gone over the horizon. Um, and so me and Jake, we called it the flying car for years. And when you don't know what you've seen, I feel like your mind attaches itself to something similar. So for me, my father owned a used car lot in my hometown. And so I was pretty familiar with older models of American vehicles. So to me, it looked like it had the lines of like an old Crown Victoria. My mind just said, okay, that was a flying car. Governments come up with a flying car. These will be rolling out in the next few years. You just got to see it before it was on the news, that sort of thing. And so we talked about it, flying car, and everyone's reaction was the same. They always thought we were joking or started making fun of us, talking about little green men, um, which no one said alien. We said floating rectangular object in the sky. Um, Even other, so-called UFO people, I've had a hard time talking to about it because people will say, well, it's not a saucer, so this can't possibly be legitimate. UFOs are flying saucers or triangles, but this wasn't that. And I actually emailed the guy, you know, 2 years ago now that I was there with. We hadn't talked in 20 years. And I asked him to just lay out what he remembered or if he remembered it at all. Because to me, after that long of not talking about it, I started to imagine that it was a dream. It was a dream. I was deluding myself in some way. This didn't actually happen. But then beat for beat, Jake comes back and tells me that the exact same version of the story that I just told you. Um, so he remembers it perfectly. He thinks about it all the time, just like I do. And I had an artist friend of mine make up a sketch of the craft, and I showed it to Jake, and he's like, "Oh my God, that's it. That's 100% accurate." So, um, yeah, I guess it really left an impression.
So your friend's mom was shut off.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
seems
and
to be happening quite a lot with when I called in my first craft. Um, so my partner at the time and I were doing C5 and everybody was outside, but no one saw it except us.
mm,
So it's as if that event was specifically designed for you and your friend.
yeah, and I think, yeah, For the uninitiated, a lot of this stuff sounds like woo, right? But I think there's a big interplay with consciousness in all of this. And for now, I've asked Jake, did this happen in your family? Has this happened anything else in your life? Did you have experiences after that? And the answer to all the above was no. So for me, the message I got from that, and not to sound self-important or anything, but it felt like to me a message that because this is a shared experience with another seemingly rational person, people don't share hallucinations, that this was sort of giving me the wink that some of the stuff I experienced when I was younger might have actually been real. Um, when you have events from very early childhood that you're, I guess, passing off as nightmares. I had nightmares when I was little. And then you see something that someone else saw with you, like, hold on, is this connected to that? And I don't know the answer to that, but that to me, that's how I've interpreted it.
So, did this really trigger your passion to start asking questions and talking with family if they also had other experiences?
Yeah, so after I saw the orange orb, I decided to stop being scared. So, for instance, I've seen copies of Communion by Whitley Strieber up on shelves. Um, when I was a kid, there was a copy in our basement. Scared the hell out of me. I would not go near the bookshelves. Um, and so I would avoid that. The kind of person now who would sleep with the lights on every night, make sure every window is closed and covered in the house, totally no cracks so no one can look in. Um, and just kind of thought I was a very anxious person. But as I finally decided to get over my fear and start reading about this stuff, I realized, hey, if you see one up close, you've probably had encounters with entities, is what I'm hearing. Um, then I read in a John Mack book, these things tend to run on family lines. And so I'm a fairly scientific person. I always try to observe and make real judgments based on not fanaticism, but what what I can actually observe with my eyes. Try to be very pragmatic with that. Um, and so I decide just to be scientific and rule this out so I don't have to think about it. I'm going to start asking my family members, have you had weird experiences too? So I message my grandmother. She's 88 and she's 85 at the time. But I figure I better ask her now, while I have the opportunity. And my heart kind of sank because I said, "Hey, Grandma, I just wanted to ask, have you ever seen anything weird in the sky or there's stories in the family about UFOs?" And she says, "Well, yes, actually." I'm like, "Oh, shit." I wanted the answer to be no. Um, and so she describes back when she was a baby. Okay, and I think maybe I've narrowed the year down to 1942, but I'm not certain. Um, she lived in Twin Falls, Idaho, with my great grandparents, and they're riding in the car at night going to go get groceries, and out of the sky in front of them descends a silver ball of light. Flash cut to the next morning, because that's apparently where the memory ends. Okay. My great grandfather's field, was covered in little silver tinsel, like this sort of tinsel like material that you touch it and it disintegrates. And what struck me about that is, have you ever heard about the miracle at Fatima? Um, so this, event happened in Portugal where people believe they saw Mother Mary. Jacques Vallée has interpreted it as a UFO encounter. And as the craft or Mother Mary or whatever is leaving, leaves the ground covered in these little silver strings. Um, and I'd seen in a documentary recently about an event that happened in Twin Falls, Idaho in 1942, with UFO sightings and farmers' fields were covered in little silver tinsel. Um, so it all kind of caught up that, just recently I was able to verify that someone else in that area had a similar experience. And my grandmother is incredibly old-fashioned, very religious, so I'm surprised she shared this with me at all. Um, but she's not the type, you know.
How about your mom or any siblings might have gone through similar stuff?
All of them, yeah. So um, we can go to my mom, and my dad had a experience separately. But in the 90s, my little brother, or my mom was pregnant with him, so this would have been 95, 96. Um, this is the same time I'm having nighttime encounters, and my brother's having weird stuff going on, but it sort of wedged the whole family. None of us were talking about our weird experiences. Um, she says, and I believe her, that a white orb comes in through the window, scans her pregnant belly, and zooms back out the window. Um, and was that just a pregnancy scare dream? Maybe, but it scared the piss out of her, and she, I'm trying to play devil's advocate. I do believe her, but it, you want to come up with a more comfortable explanation. Um, so that's item one. Okay. My father, on the other hand, his dad was a NASA engineer, so there's a little tie-in there. He helped create components for the Apollo rockets, and um, my dad's 14 years old, and that's a number that's going to come up a lot, but he's 14 years old, same age I was. Him and my grandpa are driving in the car, getting ready to take him to work, and uh, what he describes as an orange fireball comes down the road and speeds past their vehicle. My grandpa skids off the road, and of course, he's NASA engineer, um, doesn't want anything to happen to his position or his credibility. He says, Richard, you'll never talk about this. And that's that. They never spoke about it again. Said, we're not going to talk about this. Um, so that's kind of a weird one too, especially knowing my grandfather and thinking back, um, in terms of screen memories and things, his entire house was decorated with owls. Um, and so if you know anything about the owl connection, it could just be one more coincidence to throw on top of the stack, but he was absolutely fascinated with them.
Now, does your brother remember his?
Yeah,
The
so I have an older brother and a younger brother, and my younger brother, the one who was being scanned in that situation, he was about 14 years old, and him and my stepbrother, my parents divorced in the 2000s, um, they were sitting out on the trampoline at my dad's house at night, and they both wake up, meaning they don't remember falling asleep. Okay. And above them, they can see the stars except for a big circular spot directly above the trampoline, which then goes off. And he then runs inside with my stepbrother Chet, and I guess they hid in the basement the rest of the night. We're Colorado guys, so they're holding their guns, being like, don't come mess with us. And they took it very, very seriously. Um, and that was again with someone genetically outside the family with him as a co-witness at the age of 14. Um, so he also has continued to have experiences um, where he'll see interesting things like, Greeley had old hookah bar. I don't know if it's still there, but that's what all the teenagers would go do is smoke hookah. And you come out, it's 2 a.m., take a look up, good stars out there. And he sees a green ball of light, moving around, doing its business. Um, Similarly, he lives in Florida now, and he was telling me that when him and his wife were fishing, night fishing, they see out over the water, above the water, a big ball of fire just shoot out a flame, disappear, reappear in another section, shoot out another column of flame. And this happened a couple times. And I guess my sister-in-law doesn't even like to go outside at night anymore because of this. So, um, older brother, similar kind of stuff. He's not seen craft per se, but he has a lot of what I would consider to be screen memories. Um, for instance, in the same period of time where my mom had her encounter and I was having encounters, um, my mom leaves, just runs out for a quick trip to the gas station or somewhere. He's just barely old enough where he can be alone by himself for a few minutes. And the family chihuahua walks up to him and tells him, "It's time." Now, to me, okay, he fell asleep while mom was gone and he had a dream. Um, until I'm reading, I want to say Abduction by John Mack, or maybe Missing Time, one of the two. And he's talking about people having screen memories with animals and how often an animal, like a family pet, will walk up to them and say something like, "It's time." And at the time, I was listening to this in my car as an audiobook, and I about swerved off the road. I'm like, whoa. Um, because that is just, it's synchronicity after synchronicity. I hear something, I poke at it a little bit, I ask my family members, and every single one of them says yes to having had some sort of weird experience with another witness, usually.
So when did your childhood memories start coming back?
So, probably right around the same time as I started thinking about the craft. And once I confirmed with Jake, yeah, that was real, start to wonder, was maybe this other stuff real too? And realizing all of these things were happening at this same house growing up. Um, and I start maybe taking it a little bit more seriously. Now, I'll give you a rundown of what kind of happened. I had a recurring issue where many nights, not every night, but when I was about 5, 6, um, I would have someone come in the door of my room. A short person, about 3 feet tall, with a little space helmet. Okay. And usually there'd be about three of the little ones, often accompanied when I would be scared out of my pants by a tall, wispy, skinny one who seemed to be the boss. And again, reading other people's encounters, that's spot on to just absolutely as stereotypical as you can get. Um, but it would be accompanied by I would be completely frozen. Okay. I would feel like pins and needles. Like if I try to move, it would feel like, you know, that feeling when you lay on your arm and you wake up and you can't move it, except full body. I'd be trying to scream and I couldn't get any sound out. And um, usually the way it would play out is I would see these things come in my room and we flash cut to after they're gone because I don't remember the in between. And then I'm just sitting up straight in my bed, sweating, unable to move, trying to call for my parents. Um, and this is something that happened over and over. And, it would be really easy and I do entertain this thought. It'd be easy to call it sleep paralysis, and that's people's explanation for this sort of thing. And I I have to say, like the entity encounters really felt dreamlike, and I think that's kind of the nature of these sorts of things. Um, so I can't say if it occurred in like consensus reality, were these things physically in my room? Was it a mental projection into me in some way, or was it a dream? I don't know the answer to that, but there's a lot of other things that stack up with this length of time or in this time period, um, that it kind of makes me give a little bit more weight to it. Um, but I'd say the biggest event in there that I remember though is one night I actually do manage to let a scream out. Okay. And the tall one comes in. Now I see it's almost like you're looking through Vaseline. Like my eyes wouldn't fully focus. I think, oh, it's my mom. She's coming in to help me. It gets close enough. I see its face, and it is most certainly not my mother. Um, and that was absolutely terrifying. My memory of it is of being sort of halfway between a tall gray and a mantid. Um, I've done hypnotic regression on this as well, just recently to see if anything new would pop up. And, it came up back more explicitly mantid-like under that scenario. But again, you have to ask, is regression really a reputable thing or not? I don't have the answer to that, but um, it certainly didn't change my memory of things that much.
Do you remember how they showed up in your bedroom?
Came in through the door, you know. My door would open, there'd be backlit behind it, and yeah, so I mean that's also when I started sleeping with the lights on and the door closed and something up against the door. Of course, that's not going to stop them. Um, and approaching my parents about this, they of course gave me the rundown of, oh, it's a dream. You're having nightmares. Don't worry. Well, and it's started happening to one of my own kids recently. Uh, at the age of 4, I took him a little bit more seriously, especially when he's describing sort of the same tall, skinny being that I'd seen, and orbs outside of his window, and memories of owls looking in his window at night. Um, so that adds a little bit of a layer to it for me. Luckily, is able to be a little bit more compassionate with him about it and say, okay, I don't know what's happening. Um, I'm not going to say it's just a dream, but you seem to be safe. Whatever it is not hurting you, you know?
So nothing bad came out of it.
It's pretty traumatizing. Um, for me personally, um, in some respects, I think there's some aspects that have lingered that have made intimate relationships a little bit of a challenge. Um, just say that there are some things, I don't want to go into explicit detail, but there's some things that were more invasive and less friendly than just showing up in your room. And um, that makes it hard when you're trying, a young person trying to learn about intimacy.
So they took bodily fluids out of you?
Hard to say. Um, I have this memory of sometime in my early teens. Again, good, innocent, probably sheltered a little bit kid. And it's a dream about a robot, okay? A robotic being taking some sort of tube. and putting it down in areas. I was like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Said, "We're going to take your seed." I thought that was a weird way of saying they're going to castrate me because I don't know what the hell that means. Um, but then how did I come up, if this is a dream, how did I come up with seed if I don't know what that means? So, um, and there were a few ones like that later on once I'd reached like sexual maturity age. And so that just gives me a little pause. Could that be teenage hormone dreams, or is this related to this larger pattern? You know? So every step I'm trying to stop myself and say, is this all just a coincidence? And
Yeah.
I kind of
Now,
wish it was.
do you remember how the beings left your bedroom?
No, I would just suddenly be awake, alone, sitting straight up, frozen. And it takes several minutes to wear off.
So, do you believe that you've been abducted before? Taken?
I have to be honest with you, I don't want to say yes to that. But I would say if there is, I, I'm going to say there is a phenomenon that's occurring, and I have experienced it. Do abductions happen in physical reality? I don't know. I don't know. I don't think anyone can really know um, the true nature of this thing. It it could just all be something that is beamed into our mind, giving us weird memories. Like part of my theory is that if you get close to a UFO, whatever field is around it is going to mess with your noggin. They've shown in studies you can manipulate someone's emotion with a strong enough electromagnet right by their head. Um, this could be having some similar unintended effect with their propulsion. I don't know.
You sent me an image of three orbs. Was that the one related to the your orb story in the beginning?
So the three orbs, that's actually one of my earliest memories. Um, so those were three silver balls. This was again about when I was 6 years old. Um, my mom was getting the mail in her her 91 Chevy Lumina, I want to say, old minivan from the 90s. And I'm kind of leaning forward, looking out the window. I remember this distinctly because I was seeing it through the blue tinted eyebrow of the old van that they used to have. And there's these three little silver orbs just rotating and changing places with each other, maintaining an equilateral triangle formation. Um, yeah.
Do you remember when you were a kid if you had any type of poltergeist activity or ghost stuff happen in your
Yeah.
house?
Um, yeah. Gosh, I kind of, with these sorts of things, I almost feel embarrassed because I tick like every box. So yes. Um, as an example, me and a friend are hanging out one time and, we're looking across the hall to the bathroom and the faucets are not turn, right? They're the kind that lift up. And when we see the faucet lift up and turn on. So, and my little one has complained of his closet door opening and closing by itself at night sometimes too. Um, Members of our family have woken up with triangles on our skin. Um, yeah.
Yeah, the it does tend to run in the family when you're an experiencer to have these paranormal stuff happen to you. You wanted to talk about a cattle mutilation event near a missile silo?
Yeah, so that one very odd again because I hadn't thought about it in years until my little brother just within the past year sends me a just a video of this guy showing cattle mutilation out in his field. And I think to myself, holy smokes, we saw something like that once. And so if you've looked into the mutilation thing, um, very common on the eastern side of Colorado, right, out in the Great Plains, even more common near missile silos. Um, Now, there's a place that I've gone for years. We would go shooting growing up there quite a bit called the Pawnee National Grasslands out in Colorado. Um, and out there, the whole area is dotted with nuclear missile silos. And the only way that you know them is there's a square chain link fence in the middle of nowhere that says, must have permission of base commander to approach, use of deadly force authorized. So, me and my brother and my good friend were out shooting that day. So we had a car full of guns, and we see a weird chain link fence, and we approach it to read the sign, realize, oh, this is a nuke, turn around to leave, and of course, a Humvee's waiting for us right there, and we had to answer questions for an hour. Um, everything was fine. But that same day, we like right in that proximity, we had been exploring old abandonments. That part of the U.S., if you're familiar with the Homestead Act at all, so there were two Homestead Acts when America colonized the West and uh, unfortunately took away the land from the people who were living there already, um, and started giving away land to colonists. And the first Homestead Act went really well in terms of setting up farms, give everyone 50 acres out in the middle of nowhere. If you improve the land over 5 or whatever many years, you get to keep it. Okay, the second Homestead Act was further west in the far drier regions of, Colorado, western Nebraska, Kansas, and they tried to give farmers the same amount of land, which they overgrazed, and you got the Dust Bowl, right? So, um, a lot of these Second Homestead Act farms were abandoned, and they're sitting out there, these old buildings from the 1800s, usually sitting like this. And you can walk right up and go into them. No one's going to stop you. It's in the middle of nowhere. But we walked into one, and me and my brother find a cow. And again, knowing nothing of the mutilation phenomenon whatsoever at the time, we stumble upon this cow that has uh, a perfectly circular hole in the back of its neck. I mean, laser precision, looked like a cookie cutter. Um, and obviously, no lips. And I didn't check to see if the anus had been cored out. I know that's part of it. I didn't know to look. Um, but basically, this thing had a hole in the back of its neck, and it was a big empty bag of bones. It was like a dry wine sack. Like you could look in through the hole and see the bones, but there were no muscles or organs inside, or blood, or any sign of struggle. And it was inside this old dilapidated building. So we just thought some sicko dragged a cow in here and killed it, and somehow sucked everything out of it except for its bones. And lo and behold, years later, we look into it, and that's the exact part of the country where the cattle mutilations were happening at the time when they were like at their height. Um, so it's my belief that we stumbled upon one, and especially with, close proximity to the nuclear silos out there. Now, I can't say this is related to the rest of my experiences, but it's certainly was a weird thing, and it kind of checks one of those boxes as well.
How's your wife handling all of this?
Um, it was a struggle at first, I think, in that nobody wants to believe that any of this stuff is happening. Okay, it's a lot easier when it's just something in the National Enquirer or something that the news makes fun of every 6 months for half a minute, you know? Um, and having experienced a lot of that teasing myself growing up when I tried to talk about it, we hadn't really addressed it. I'd maybe told her in passing, oh, yeah, I saw a flying car once, believe me or don't. And she kind of like, whatever. She's very serious, business minded, very pragmatic. She's a naval veteran, spent 8 years in the Navy as a sonar technician. Um, Never saw anything weird on the ocean, never saw anything weird in the water. Loves to study physics. That's the kind of person she is. So the other side of that, though, is that we have a really strong bond, and I would never ever lie to her, and she knows that, and she believes me. Um, and what really got me about this is as I'm trying to explore this and doing engaging in a little CE5 and things like that myself and having positive results. Um, as you know, it's not going to happen if there's a skeptic sitting next to you. They're gonna tamper the experience. They're not gonna prove it to them, and that's fine. And I accepted that about her. And um, but about 3 months ago, after I'd done another interview for a podcast like this, the next day, we're set to do some stargazing, and I'm getting excited beforehand, thinking, okay, maybe, I talked about this. Maybe the universe will wink back at me. And so her, myself, and a friend of hers who's, we'll just say very high level military, who has worked at places like Nellis Air Force Base and Edwards and knows what Janet Air is and Area 51, who will not engage on this topic, but just says, oh, there's lots of interesting things out there. The three of us are getting ready to stargaze together, and I think, well, with her here, plus me and my wife, there's going to be a chance we'll see something cool, and then we can have that conversation. Um, so as we're setting up, I kind of get the thought in my head, you know, look for the airplane. Like, look at if you see an airplane, stop and look at it. Okay, we live near a small airstrip, a little mountain hobbyist airstrip. Um, Tehachapi is like 2 hours from LA, so a lot of old rich guys will retire here and fly their little airplane around. Um, so we'll often see the airplane coming towards us, and you see the bright light. So we're setting up, and I see, oh, there's the bright light. There's a airplane coming towards us, and I'm looking at it just to rule out, is it anything. Always watch to see if something goes all the way across the sky and acts normal. Um, well, this thing starts hot dogging it, right? It's starting to go in figure eights all of a sudden. And we're talking, it's 20 degrees up in the sky, probably covering a wedge of 20 degrees of sky, going back and forth, literally this fast. And as it's figure eighting, it's also doing tight pinwheels. And uh, so if any person was in that, they're jelly now, you know. And my wife is trying to walk, like trying her most to walk away, call her friend, say, hey, are you coming? I grab her arm and say, hold on, you need to see this. And so we watch it do its thing. And the weird thing is, um, as we're watching it, sometimes it's two lights, one on top of the other, and they're not spinning around each other like an airplane with lights on the wingtips would if it was doing barrel rolls. Um, it's remaining in lockstep, like one on straight on top of the other. And we're gonna come back to the consciousness tie-in. My wife keeps trying to look away. Anytime she looks away, it turns into one light. When we're both looking, it's two lights. Okay. I don't know if that means player one and player two are connected, but um, anyway, we're watching this for maybe 2 minutes, then it gets midway to the middle of the sky and it disappears. It doesn't turn left, right, go up, any of that. It's gone. And it was not nighttime yet. This was at dusk, which for like a sky observer, astrophotographer, such as myself, you know that just after sunset is actually when you have the best visibility for objects that are in the sky. because they're being hit by the sun that's just behind the horizon. You get a lot of reflectivity. So if it was an airplane that had, instead of coming towards us, somehow as it's doing all this stuff and turns away to where its lights are gone, we would have still seen it. Um, it was maybe 2.5 miles away based on where the airstrip was. We thought it was coming in for a landing, and it was just gone. And the weird part is her friend across town who's getting ready for to come over and watch the stars and look at my telescope and my night vision goggles with me. And Sarah, she sees it too. So she's over there getting ready, pumping gas, looking up, watching this. And we post about it in our local Tehachapi Facebook group where everyone posts about everything that happens locally. No one else saw it, just the three of us. Um, so similar to what you were saying, like it maybe being an event just for us, um, kind of felt that way. And it gets even a layer weirder, and we haven't really addressed this as much, but later in the night, as the sun went down, there's you know, cottonwood trees out on the creek near us. I live at the top of a hill, and town is off in the distance, and between us and town is sort of a forest that goes through the river of cottonwood trees. And through the top branches of the cottonwood trees, there's an orange ball just floating around, just lit up, doing its own thing. Um, I don't know. Pretty weird. That one, if I had to guess, was about the size of a basketball.
Did you ever figure out why these experiences were happening to you and your family?
I think that's the question, right? Um, I've heard theories that they monitor genetic lines. I've heard Gary Nolan, saying, "Oh, well, there's particularly smart people." Well, that's easy to say when you're, PhD. Um, but for me, meeting other experiencers, it seems to be the people who see them are going to be most perceptive. And maybe there's a gene that makes you aware of things. Let's take an example. My brother is a fisherman out in Florida, and he has so many friends who swim out in the bay. And they say it's so nice to have a place to swim where there's no sharks. Now, he, out fishing at night, has pulled in several sharks from that bay because he's out there looking for them. Now, their swimming friends are trying not to see sharks. They want to feel safe in the water, so they don't see sharks. Um, Similarly, there's stories of when Columbus landed, and on, was it Santa Maria or whatever the island was at the time? Um, he, the natives couldn't see the boat at first, until finally, their shaman notices that the waves are looking funny. There should be something out there. Then he sees it and shows it to people. Suddenly, everyone can see it. Um, I think the mind has a tendency to filter out things that it's unfamiliar with.
Can you get into the story regarding your trip to, I think, a Navajo reservation?
Yeah, yeah. So that one, actually, I'm glad we ended up delaying our conversation here because that happened just like a week ago. We wouldn't be able to talk about this today if it hadn't worked out that way. Um, so I was driving back home. My mother had flown out to take my kids out to visit with my great grandma and spend some time with her. And so I decided to drive out to pick them up and give my kids the great American road trip coming home. And uh, just being who I am, I knew I was going to be driving through a lot of really cool remote areas and I wanted to take some space pictures. So I get out to Gallup, New Mexico, which is right by the Navajo reservation, and I'm staying at, a hotel there, and um, I ask a couple Navajo that I come into contact with separately, where's a good place away from the city that I could just set up my telescope. I don't want to see any city lights, and I don't, especially don't want to bother someone or end up on their property. I want to keep to myself. And they both just coincidentally name the exact same spot, show me on a map this is a good place to go. I don't know if it's like their equivalent of like a lover's lane or something, because there were beer bottles on the ground. It's maybe a place people go to get away slightly out of town, and park. Um, but the second guy I was talking to, we kind of get into it talking about, showing him my pictures, and he asked me, "Do you ever see UFOs?" I said, "Well, I'm more interested in hearing what you have to say about that, because the Navajo have legends of sky people and skinwalkers and things of that nature." And so he tells me the area I'm going to, people have seen orbs in the sky, and he hasn't personally, but he's known people who have. Pardon me. And so I'm out there, and I drive off road for a little bit, almost get stuck in some mud. And since I'm in the middle of the res, away from anyone, no cell reception or anything, I decide once I get myself out, okay, this is where we're parking. We're not going any further. This is the spot. And so there's two comets out that night, and anyone who's watching who knows stargazing or astrophotography will recognize that in October we had a very bright lemon comet come through, lemon C 2025 or something like that, and then the swan comet, a little smaller comet, rolled through. And my friend who is the military woman I told you about, she actually messaged me that night, "Hey, be on the lookout for the lemon comet. It should be coming through tonight." Well, I have my C Star, my little smart telescope, aimed at the wrong comet, and I'm thinking to myself, this doesn't look right. This is a not a great picture by comparison to what I'm expecting. It's tracking it. It's the one that almost looks like a green hot dog in the sky I sent you, because it's tracking the trajectory of the comet over half an hour. Um, so looking around with my night vision goggles, those give you something like 50,000 times the amount of light that you can see with your naked eye. So you see everything in the sky. And I turn around, and on the mesa behind me, I find the Swan comet, or I'm sorry, the Lemon comet, the big one, is just getting ready to set behind the mesa. So I decide I'm going to watch that until it goes down. There's no point in taking the picture that night. I got it the next night. Um, but right near this comet, I start to notice some twinkling. And coming out from behind the mesa, it looks like there's airplanes taking off, like one, two, three. And I think, okay, well, there's an airstrip behind the mesa. Maybe there's a military site. It is the middle of New Mexico. They like to put those here. And I look at my phone. There's nothing back there. Got my Google Maps. I put the filter on so I can see the terrain. There's nothing for hundreds of miles. I'm looking into the reservation. So it's just wilderness out there. Then, as I made that realization, the lights stop acting like they're taking off from an airport and start coming straight up from behind the mesa. And I think, okay, someone's out there lighting Chinese lanterns, and the first three got hit with a big gust of wind. All right. So then instead of going straight up, they start turning. And okay, I guess it can't be a Chinese lantern. Someone's launching drones from behind the mesa. And mind you, as these are going, I'm watching them three times magnification with NVG7 third generation night vision goggles. You can see everything. And they're going about the distance of your fist or a roll of quarters at arm's length, apparent distance, and getting very bright and then disappearing. And I say disappearing because with 50,000 times light magnification and 3 times visual magnification, if it was a completely solid, unlit object, I'd still be able to see it. Okay, so the light goes out. I see a little dark triangle for a second, and then that disappears every single time. So after they're originating from behind the mesa going up, um, then they start originating in the sky, meaning they appear from nowhere and disappear, go on curvy path, get very bright, and disappear. So if you've ever seen like fireflies at night and how they'll light up and streak across the sky and blink out, it looked like that, except about 2.5 miles away in giants, apparently up in the sky, um, by comparison. And so after this has got my attention, I bring my little armchair around, decide, okay, this is where the show is tonight. I'm going to watch this. Um, and I watch it for probably about half an hour, these guys doing their thing. And the cool thing is, during that time, I also had an airplane fly through and a helicopter fly through. So I could separately see and have a basis for comparison and say, this is not that. Um, and yeah, so I reported it to New Mexico MUFON, and they've said they've had similar instances, but I was so far out in the middle of nowhere, obviously no one else saw it. So, or at least no one else that reported it. Um, but yeah, that's the most recent.
Are you aware if you or anyone in your family have psychic abilities?
Well, I mean, I don't think like any more than anyone else has. Um, I do think people have psychic abilities. I think they ignore them usually. Um, as an example, um, the other day when I was in Colorado, I went to an old gas station that me and my brother used to go to and get Arizona iced teas back in like, 2010. And I'm thinking about how the jerk cashier thought he was shoplifting one time, and I cussed him out because I was like, no, we're paying for Arizona's. And as I'm thinking about this instance, my little brother calls me and says, hey, you know what I was just thinking about? This is the time we went to that gas station. The guy was a jerk. And I'm at that gas station thinking about my brother, and he calls me. So there's some of that. Um, I have in the past, like, I think known what family members are thinking. I'll hear almost like a whisper and react to it like, oh, you wanted a drink here. Like, I didn't ask you for a drink, but I was thinking it. Um, but I don't think that's special to me. I think pretty much everybody probably has some story like that they could tell you, you know. Um,
Regarding your contact events, do you remember
mhm.
ever having telepathic communication with the beings?
Not as such. I remember the tall one telling me to calm down, that I was making it difficult for them to do what they needed to do, and we just need to move on. I don't remember its lips moving, but I also don't remember thinking, hey, I'm having a mind conversation. I was 6. I wasn't thinking about that. Um, but I will say, I on the note of like consciousness connection, um, there's one more story I'd like to tell you to sort of illuminate that. I have a dear friend, Bailey. We've been friends since high school, and she has had other experiences. And just as a keeping it light, almost as a joke, she came out to visit from Colorado, and I had gotten the CE5 app. And I'm like, hey, let's try this. It'll be fun. We'll set out. If nothing else, we're going to get to listen to the star or look at stars and, you know, maybe listen to some radio. I do shortwave radio at night because you get good reception from all over the world. Um, so we're setting up and just like in good spirit. She and me agreed to commit to doing the real meditation, to inviting them in. I have a ham radio license, so I broadcasted the signal on an actual robust ham radio tone. Um, so it got out there a ways. And we see this little blinking light come across the sky. Now, mind you, similar to the event in the Navajo reservation, this light that we're seeing is in the Earth's shadow, so it's not a satellite. Okay? You can't see satellites when they fly between the Earth and the sun in a way that blocks the sunlight, right? So this is like midnight, well after the time of night you see satellites. And it's like, hey, what's that? Because it was right after we'd been meditating, and it slows down and then it stops. And we're like, okay, let's quantify this. She's counting the number of blinks it does per cycle. I'm timing the duration and time between cycles. We're both trying to work this out at the same time, co-processing. And so as she's counting the blinks, guess what? The number of blinks change. They respond to us saying, okay, it's 3 blinks every 2 seconds. Well, now it's 5 blinks every 5 seconds. And so we're talking to each other. It's getting sort of an emotional rise out of us as we're trying to figure out just what the hell this is. And she's getting kind of mad. Like, because I'm like, Bailey, what do you think it is? What is that? And she's like, I don't know. I don't know. Like, she's freaking out. Neither of us thought this thing would work. And um, then it starts moving again, right angle turn downward, disappears here, reappears here, and then gets bright and flies outward, meaning away from us, like out of our atmosphere. Um, and it seemed to be responding to us, trying to disqualify what it could be, which, if you notice the pattern with my Navajo reservation interaction, it also seemed to be responding to me trying to figure out what it was, changing as I say, well, it's doing this and trying to define it as something. It squirms out and turns into something else. Um, so if I don't know if that's telepathic communication per se, but it seems to have some sort of maybe quantum consciousness connection. I don't know.
Ryan, could you get into one of your son's contact stories that we didn't get into?
Yeah. So this one's kind of interesting, and just to, preserve a little bit of anonymity for a minor, I'm not going to say which son it was, and we're going to couch this in the context of a dream. Okay. So we had an incident when my son was about 4 years old. We had another couple over. My wife and I were having boring adult conversation. So my kiddo's playing in his room. He comes out screaming, crying that a stick figure man had poked its head in his window. He calls it a stick figure man. Okay. I have been very meticulous and specific up to this point in my life not to talk to my kids about any of this. I don't want to influence them. I don't want them thinking about it or getting worried about this existential dread of there maybe being some reality A, reality B situation going on. So it comes to him of its own volition. And it he describes a tall, skinny being with wrinkly skin, big, glassy red eyes, not black like you'd hear, but big red eyes with no pupil. And it was looking in his window at him. Um, so a few days go by, and he's then at that point in his life complaining about his closet door closing and opening by itself. So he's shoved teddy bears in the jamb of his closet door to keep it from opening. He just sees it as a logistical problem. My door keeps opening. I'm going to stop it from opening. Okay. Um, to be four, But he then the next experience is this thing pokes its head in from the hallway. And so I hear the blood-curdling scream at about midnight, and I run in, and he said the stick figure man was in the hallway this time, and it looked in my room, and I looked for it, and it was gone. And so I open every closet, open every door. This is giving me flashbacks to when I was a kid. He had a curtain in his room that night also afterwards fell off of its mounting, so there was no covering on his window at all. So that scared the piss out of me. So I cover it with a tapestry, staple it onto the wall, and there it remains to this day. No one looks in or out of that window. Not messing with it. And just kind of tried to affirm him that we don't know if this is real or not. It could be a dream. But you're safe, you're okay, and moms and dads don't let little boys get taken away or hurt. So we'll protect you. So he spent the next year after that sleeping in our bed, off and on. Um, but I start getting into it with him a little later after he's calm, and I ask him, "Have you been having any weird dreams?" I tried to ask open-ended questions, so I'm not leading him. He said, and what do you mean weird dreams? Well, you might have a dream about a weird animal. Maybe you might have a nightmare of some kind. Have you had any dreams you want to talk about? And he says, well, yes, actually. Um, I dreamt about a deer. He said, I had a dream that I went to the kitchen and there was a deer with big red eyes and it's standing upright in the middle of our kitchen looking at me. And so I run outside and I look in the sky and there's a big red triangle. He said the ground fell away from him and he started floating up to the triangle. He wakes up in a room with round walls, and in his 4-year-old terminology, there was a table next to him with a tray covered in little swords. Sounds like medical equipment. Um, and he said it was an empty room with white round walls, no corners, and that someone takes him from behind and puts him in some sort of machine that pokes him with needles. And he said, again, he's 4 at the time, so he initially describes it as they put me in a blender. And I said, what do you mean by a blender? He's like, well, it was like a clear box where they put needles in me. And um, obviously, that's the last thing you want to hear as a parent with these kinds of experiences. Um, and I had also asked him, do you have any other animal memories you want to talk about? Well, he says that he has memories of 3 owls looking in his window, and that in the distance behind them there was a glowing ball of light. And that similarly, when the stick figure man looked in his window, there was a glowing ball of light. Um, Now, this is a slight tangent, but I checked in with my brother who has a child of similar age, and he told me around that same time in her life, she starts drawing balloon men. And what I mean by that is a shape like this, like an almond shaped, pumpkin seed shaped head with big black eyes, and she calls them the balloon heads. And she talked about the mean man who would come to her window. So, is it something that's running in our extended family? I mean, perhaps, you know.
I believe you wanted to talk about your YouTube site.
Oh, yeah, well, it's just a brief, not trying to be a shill or anything, but I do have a little YouTube channel where I review old video games that nobody cares about and do some soldering. So if that's something y'all are interested in, that's your buddy Ryan at YouTube, and I would absolutely welcome anyone who wants to come check it out.
Awesome. To finish off the interview, do you have like one final story that you might want to share, or perhaps a closing statement?
Mm. Let me think. I mean, we've pretty well rapid fire covered the gamut of sort of my stories. I guess I do have something I want to say though. And this is a challenge I'm putting out there to the skeptics. Okay. Listening to me, I'm not going to convince you that any of this is real. Okay. I know that. If you don't think this is real, you're laughing at me right now. And that's okay. I respect that because I would be too, had I not experienced it personally. Um, but my challenge to you is sit outside 100 nights. Okay. Put in the time. Hunters go out into the woods tracking elk and they find them. A casual is not always going to easily come across an elk. I think this is about that common. I don't think UFOs are that rare. Okay. I think that it's just that nobody is looking for them. There's been such a psyop that our government and the media have explicitly been participating in. And in Canada too, you know. There's plenty of documentation to show that the government is trying to throw people off the trail of this phenomenon, whatever it is. Um, so my challenge to you is you sit outside, pair of binoculars, uh, or just your naked eyes, if that's all you've got, go out somewhere dark. If you're outside just looking broad spectrum in the sky 100 nights, you're going to see something weird up there. Guaranteed. Um, it's just a matter of, are you actively looking? So be scientific. Go out there and prove me wrong. Make your hypothesis. Do observations and come to a conclusion. Don't just write it off based on you saw, some story from some, Cowtown kid in 2004 saw a craft. Ha ha ha, that's very funny.
Well, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. It's been fun. You have an amazing story. You're an amazing speaker, and I'm really glad that you agreed to come on my show.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to hear me out. I think it's really important we share these stories because more people have experienced this than are talking about it.
True. So to those watching today's interview, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm your host, Mr. Great. More interviews coming up, and we'll see you guys next time. So take care, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Great, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.